G'day folks, ZD here. Thanks to having early access to review code, I've put over 50 hours into exploring the early game and systems of Starfield. As such, I wanted to give you some thoughts and tips on what skills to prioritize and what to maybe ignore for the first 10 or 20 levels of the game. You should always play however you think will be fun, but this will give you some non-spoilerish insights into the early game and what skills are going to add to your fun and make a real difference. So first, let's talk about some must-haves or really good perks. I highly recommend, at least at level 2 or 3, or roughly an hour into the game when you first get your boost pack, picking up 1 point in boost pack training if you don't already have it from your background. The first point unlocks the ability to use the boost packs, the jet packs in the game, and I don't think you're ever going to want to be without one ever again. The subsequent ranks in it are nice. They effectively give you another little burst so that you can travel a little bit further or jump a little bit higher, and then rank 4 is going to be able to double that, maybe giving you a second burst, and it makes a bigger difference on low gravity environments. You can actually probably fly almost infinitely with rank 4 on really low gravity environments, which is quite cool, but really you only need, at least early on, the first point. Another skill to take early on, not necessarily because it's super useful early on, but as a long-term investment, is piloting. Initially, this unlocks the ability to use the ship's thrusters, which allows you to strafe with the ship in the alternate control mode. You can hold space and then strafe sideways and things like that. It's helpful for staying behind enemies in combat, but not strictly necessary. Increased maneuverability on rank 2 is quite nice for if you get your ship laden down with cargo a little bit more and it's getting a little slower, it's going to speed things back up a little bit, so quite nice. But the main thing is you're pushing towards this investment of rank 3 and 4 that unlocks the ability to use Class B and C ships. This unlocks better reactors and better equipment that goes along with those reactors, and those make a big difference if you plan on doing a lot of spaceship stuff. The reason why I recommend taking this early on is actually because all skills have a challenge that are required in order to unlock higher ranks in it. So you can spend the first point for free, but in order to get rank 2, you have to complete the challenge first, and so on. Now, the challenge for this one takes a little bit of time. That's why I'm saying take it early on. You have to destroy a certain number of ships in order to unlock each subsequent rank. If you wait until you want to upgrade to Class B ships in order to get rank 1 and start upgrading, it can take quite a long time to catch up. Taking this early on will allow you to start getting those ship kills early on. You get some pretty early in the game, for example, that you can then unlock the next rank and start working on the next one. And then by the time you want a Class B ship, you'll be able to fly it straight away. You'll already be able to unlock rank 3. So that's why I recommend taking on piloting early on and upgrading it whenever you can. It's a good investment for the future, trust me. Continuing on the topic of spaceship action, targeting control systems is a really good one to put at least 1 point into. It unlocks ship targeting functionality, which is kind of like a VAT system. It slows down time and allows you to target specific parts of the ship. It's really great for getting extra shots off in combat during a small combat opportunity, making combat a little bit easier in general, damaging enemy weapons so that they can't do as much damage to you, but most importantly, it's used for disabling enemy engines so that you can do boarding actions. Without this, it's very hard to do, or I don't even know if it's strictly possible. I haven't been able to do it without targeting control systems. Whenever I use electromagnetic weapons to try and disable enemy ships, I just end up disabling their grav drives if I'm not using targeting control, which doesn't actually stop them from flying and allow you to board. So I think you do need targeting control systems for it. So the 1 point is very good. This is for a couple reasons why a boarding action is important. If you're pirating, you can steal cargo. Very nice. Not just the stuff that's left over after the explosion, which is not much. You get a lot more loot if you're actually bored. But the same goes for taking out pirates too. You board, kill the pirates on board, take their loot, steal stuff from the captain's locker, and then take things from the cargo hold. You get a lot more loot than you do if you just blow up the pirates. Now, if there's like 5 pirates in an area, you're going to have to shoot them down mostly, but you could board the last one and take all the extra loot from it. And then there's another upside to this as well. Disabling and doing boarding actions allows you to actually steal ships. So when it comes time to, like I was talking about before, upgrade to a Class B ship, once you've got piloting rank 3, you can actually just steal a Class B ship. I'll have a video uploaded on that soon, so keep an eye out for that. Another skill that I really recommend 1 point in is stealth. You can sneak and stay hidden without stealth, you just crouch down, but you kind of have to go by instincts. There's no stealth meter. The first rank unlocks a stealth meter. The second rank also upgrades that stealth meter and makes it a bit informative. And obviously each rank makes you a lot better at sneaking and do things with additional sneak attack damage. So if you're going stealth archer, obviously you'll want all of the ranks in this. But for literally anyone, stealth is useful for getting into position in combat, or if you're a little bit sneaky, stealing things from shops and things like that, because it gives you the bar and it tells you if you're hidden. That is very crucial information in a lot of scenarios. Definitely worth 1 skill point. Now, something you could skip, but I think is very fun and worth the point, is theft. With theft, you unlock the ability to pickpocket. You can't actually do it without that 1 skill point. And even if you're not really like playing a baddie or a rogue or a pirate or something like that, being able to take key cards when necessary, do a few little sneaky shenanigans, and weaken a few enemies before you take them on by stealing their grenades and stuff like that is worth the 1 point, but I'll leave that one up to you. Now, this one doesn't unlock anything, but it makes an important resource much more efficient, and that is medicine. I recommend taking points in medicine basically whenever you can and continuing to upgrade it. It makes med packs heal faster, but also heal more, which means that they're more efficient. You can continue to build them up as a resource long term, which is very helpful. Probably not necessary if you're playing on an easier difficulty, and that's perfectly fine if that is going to be your preference. You might not need this, but if you're playing on normal or harder, then points in medicine is going to be very nice. I regret not taking this earlier because I did end up running out of med packs. Another thing I'll note is any points you spent early in science are really not wasted because you definitely want to work your way towards weapon engineering and spacesuit design. These allow you to add more advanced mods, and I will say very useful mods, to weapons and your suits. Weapon engineering in particular, getting points in this will allow you to put proper scopes and change things to semi-automatic and add silencers and things like that. Crucial if you want to do any sort of stealth archer gameplay. But pretty much everyone is going to want to mod and customize their suits and weapons, especially as they get a little further in the game. Once you start getting to that point at level 20, you start finding some really nice legendary weapons, but they don't have the mods that you want, and you're like, doesn't really fit my playstyle. Having access to these is super important. So again, early points in science, 4 points in these early ones, wherever you put them, it helps you unlock these so that you can use those. Now let's talk about some skills that are pretty good early on, but definitely not necessary. A good example of those is Geology. The first rank gives you more common and uncommon inorganic resources, so when you mine things like metals on the surface, you'll sometimes get like 2 of them. If you're planning on doing some weapon modding or suit modding or crafting or building some outposts, then you're going to need a decent stockpile of things like aluminum, iron, nickel, and so on. And this just speeds up the time to get those basic resources, to get your like starting capital of resources by quite a lot. So the 1 point there is quite worth it. Interestingly, the later points might not really be that worth it except for very later on, because you don't need as many of the rarer resources. You need mostly the common ones, at least initially. So in that early game scenario, the 1 point I think is quite good. I put security into this category as well. You can technically unlock basic locks without any points in this, but if you want to hack more advanced locks and make it a bit easier to do so, then you're going to want points in this. A note on security is you never really need it to do something, to progress a quest or to get through an area. There's always an alternate route that you can take that doesn't involve lockpicking. What security does do is gives you access to shortcuts, gives you some little extra advantages, like for example being able to disable turrets or turn them on the enemies, and it gives you extra loot mostly. That's mostly what it does, is more loot. Everyone loves more loot, so you're probably going to put points into this, right? If you plan on doing a lot of planet surveying, this is also one that's good, but definitely not necessary. Surveying points increase the zoom on your hand scanner and allow you to scan things from further away. I will note, once again, I did in my beginner's guide, but that you don't need to scan things. You can also harvest from them or kill them or do various other interactions with them that will also count as scanning. But if you're doing a lot of explicitly surveying activity, you want to fully survey planets, then points in this is very good. Initially, you have to be within 10 meters to scan something, which is very close, basically melee range. Getting this up to 50 and then later doubling it with outpost buildings that allow you to double that range means that you'll be able to complete those full surveys on those really jam-packed planets much faster. I got 3 ranks in this, and the zoom looks like this. It's not a big deal, but it is cute. You'll notice I haven't mentioned combat much, and that's because this all kind of falls into the pretty good but not strictly necessary category. Obviously, if you're playing on harder difficulties, then you're probably going to need to consider combat perks earlier on. But the other thing is that combat has a lot of specificity. So early on, you're going to be getting a lot of different types of weapons, and I encourage you to try them all and find out what you enjoy. Of course, if you know that you want to be a pistol slinging Western guy, then pistol certification, you go ahead and take it, sure. What I will say though is, if you want to take some combat buffs early on, then consider taking the more broadly applicable ones. So for example, ballistics, which gives damage for all ballistic weapons and later on range, or lasers that gives damage for all laser weapons. At least if you take these more broadly applicable ones, that means those skill points are applying to a greater variety of weapons until you start to hone in on the specific playstyle that you want to focus on long term. I think the combat tree for me is going to be something that I start looking at after level 10 or 20. In social, commerce is another perk that I think is good, but definitely not necessary, and that's because you can circumvent this by just doing more, right? Assuming you have infinite time to play video games in your life, you can always go to the next dungeon, and there are basically infinite of those. So you can always get more credits, but many of us gamers don't have infinite time to play video games. So if you want your time invested to pay out more, then the commerce is probably worth it. Based on the economics that I've seen of the game, the 10% more sell, especially, and later on 25% more, is actually pretty impactful. So not too bad to take. I will say that the point value seems to be the best on the first level because you get 10% more for 1 point, whereas it's only 5 for each subsequent point. So you could just take 1 rank in that and call it a day. I mentioned med pack efficiency earlier, and wellness does the same thing. It increases your max health, makes it harder for you to die, but it also makes your med packs more efficient. If you have 400 health and you take 10% increase, you have 440, and your med pack heals a percentage of that 440, say 10%, then that's 4 extra points of healing that you got for the same med pack. So wellness is a great perk. It's certainly going to be taking it on higher difficulties, and it's going to be great even on normal, I think, long term. If you're surveying a lot, once again, for that playstyle, fitness is probably going to be worth taking. Initially, it's just more oxygen, which is not too bad. You can sprint for a bit longer before running out. It's going to have a double synergy if you're also playing a melee build and using power attacks and such, because then you'll have a bit more oxygen for the combat as well, so that'll be nice. But rank 4 is the main one where it significantly lowers the oxygen usage of sprinting and those power attacks. So if you're surveying melee character, definitely take this, but if you're doing a lot of survey, it's probably worth taking as well. Finally, let's talk about a couple ones that I don't really recommend taking early on. Not necessarily that they're bad, just maybe not so good early. A good example of this is Gymnastics. Now this does a couple of different things, this skill. Initially, it gives you a combat slide, which is, I took that to test, and it looks a little something like this. It's cute, but it's not a very long slide, so you can't really use it to slide down hills or anything either. You don't go any further down hills, it seems, or if it is, it's a very small amount. So it's not really a traversal skill so much. It's cute, so whether that's worth the point, I'll leave up to you. The less fall damage part of the first 3 ranks, though, I will say is kind of useless, for the reason that we have boost packs, right? So I'm never in any danger of taking fall damage, because I can simply boost pack before I hit the ground. So I'm not super stoked on taking these early on. I will say though, rank 4 changes the story completely. So long term, I might consider taking 4 ranks in this, but I'm not excited about those early ranks. The good thing to note is that the challenge for this is just to take fall damage. So that's super easy to do. You can literally just do it like instantly. So it's only 100 fall damage for the first one, which is often just 1 fall. So that's not a big deal. But the 4th rank, increased jump height, run faster after combat sliding or mantling, that actually sounds really good to me. So my evaluation of this skill changes completely when you look at rank 4. But just those first 2 ranks early on, I'm probably going to leave it to later and then burn a couple skill points in a row to level it up. Astrodynamics in science is kind of a head scratcher for me, and I definitely don't recommend taking this. Maybe like late game it has some applications that I don't know about yet, but for now it seems basically useless. Increases the grav jump range of jump drives, reduces the fuel, which effectively increases your range as well, it seems, and then just does that more. But the thing is that when it comes to traveling around, you can just plot a course and do intermediate jumps. And that's what I mean, like maybe later on there's some like systems that are a little further away. It doesn't really look like it though. There's always a system you can jump to. So like, it allows you, having that perk would allow you to jump further in one jump. So instead of needing to jump to Bernard's Star and Andromeus here, you would just be able to jump straight to Andromeus maybe. But the thing is, fuel actually doesn't cost anything. It just automatically refills. It's just a kind of a warp distance effectively. And you can always just jump there and it's effectively instant. If you've traveled there before, you actually just end up skipping it. Let me travel to Andromeus. I'll just go straight there, right? Because I've been to Bernard's Star before. There we go. Pirates, great. So I really don't see the necessity of this. It might make exploring a little faster for areas you haven't been, but as soon as you've traveled a place, you can use it as an intermediate jump point. So I don't really understand the point of this skill. So I definitely don't recommend taking it early on. I could be missing something, so let me know in the comments if you think I am. Another one I think maybe isn't really worth it early on is research methods. The early research projects and crafts that you do cost very few resources, like 3 or 4 or 5 maybe, so the 10% reduction doesn't actually seem to do anything. I do think this might be worth it later on, because some of those projects I think much later on are going to be worth a lot and take a lot of resources. If they start taking 10 rare resources, then the higher reduction levels are going to make a pretty big difference at that point. But the other thing to consider is that maybe by that point you might have access to a lot of those resources anyway. You might already be automatically mining them from various outposts and things. So at that point, I'm not so sure. The thing that will probably tip this into maybe being worth taking long term, like much later in the game, is the fact that you'll be reducing crafting costs by 60%, which means that crafting things like treatments and drugs and stuff like that is potentially going to be a lot more profitable. You can get the raw resources, craft them, and make probably infinite credits that way. So it might be worth taking long term, but early on, it seems to have very, very little impact. So I don't recommend taking it too early. One more thing I think is probably not going to be super worth it early on is environmental conditions. The way that the system seems to work seems like this a little bit of extra resistance isn't going to do that much for you. Maybe later on when you're exploring much more hazardous planets, this might end up being worth something. The other thing to consider is like the afflictions from environmental damage sources. The treatments are very plentiful, so it's not too big a deal to heal these. And if you take the final level in med packs, you're also going to be healing them for free anyway. So I don't really think environmental conditioning looks like it's going to be all that good in the long run either. I might be wrong later on. Again, I've only explored to a certain point in the game at this point, but certainly not worth taking early on based on what I've seen. The way the suit protection system works is that, you know, you can kind of stop taking the effect. So you walk near a vent of gas and you take some damage on the suit's protections, that starts to run out, you move away, the suit protection comes back, and then you're good to go. So as long as you don't take continued exposure, it's not too much of a problem. And I don't think this extra little bit of resist is going to make all that much difference anyhow. Alrighty folks, so that's my early game thoughts on skills in Starfield. I hope it helps you enjoy the game a little bit more. That's it for now. I'm Ziggy D, and thanks for watching.